This is the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. And Mark Twain wrote it. And I'll read that version of it. But then it was put into translated into French. And he hated what happened. So we're going to read the main story, then the follow up. The celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County. In compliance with the request of a friend of mine who wrote me from the East, I called on good-natured, garrulous old Simon Wheeler and inquired after my friend's friend, Leonidas W. Smiley, as requested to do, and I hereunto append the result. I have a lurking suspicion that Leonidas W. Smiley is a myth, that my friend never knew such a personage, and that he only conjectured that, if I asked old Wheeler about him, it would remind him of his infamous Jim Smiley, and he would go to work and bore me nearly to death with some infernal reminiscence of him as long and tedious as it should be useless to me. If that was the design, it certainly succeeded. I found Simon Wheely dozing comfortably by the barroom stove of the old dilapidated tavern in the ancient mining camp of Angels, and I noticed that he was fat and bald-headed, and had an expression of winning gentleness and simplicity upon his tranquil countenance. He roused up and gave me good day. I told him a friend of mine had commissioned me to make some inquiries about a cherished companion of his boyhood named Leonidas W. Smiley. Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, a young minister of the gospel, who he had heard was at one time a resident of Angel's Camp. I added that, if Mr. Wheeler could tell me anything about this Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, I would feel under many obligations to him. Simon Wheeler backed me into a corner and blockaded me there with his chair, and then sat me down and reeled off the monotonous narrative which follows this paragraph. He never smiled. He never frowned. He never changed his voice from the gentle flowing key to which he tuned the initial sentence. He never betrayed the slightest suspicion of enthusiasm, but all through the interminable narrative there ran a vein of impressive earnestness and sincerity, which showed me plainly that, so far from his imagining that there was anything ridiculous or funny about his story, he regarded it as a really important matter, and admired its two heroes as men of transcendent genius and finesse. To me, the spectacle of a man drifting serenely along through such a queer yarn without ever smiling was exquisitely absurd. As I said before, I asked him to tell me what he knew of Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, and he replied as follows. I let him go on in his own way, and never interrupted him once. There was a fellow here once by the name of Jim Smiley in the winter of 49, or maybe it was the spring of 50. I don't recollect exactly. Somehow, through what makes me think it was one or the other, is because I remember the big flume wasn't finished when he first came to the camp. But anyway, he was the curiousest man who about always bet on anything that turned up you ever see. If he could get anybody to bet on the other side, and if he couldn't, he'd change sides. Anyway, that suited the other man would suit him anyway, and just so he's just got a bet, he was satisfied. But still, he was lucky. Uncommon lucky. He must always come out winner. He was always ready and laying for a chance. There couldn't be no solitary thing mentioned but that feller'd offer to bet on it and take and any side you please, as I was just telling you. If there was a horse race, you'd find him flush, or you'd find him busted at the end of it. If there was a dog fight, he'd bet on it. If there was a cat fight, he'd bet on it. If there was a chicken fight, he'd bet on it. Why? If there was two birds setting on a fence, he would bet you which one would fly first. Or if there was a camp meeting, he would be there regular to bet on Parson Walker, which he judged to be the best exhorter about here. And so he was too, and a good man. If he even seen a straddle bug start to go anywheres, he would bet you how long it would take him to get wherever he was going to. And if you took him up, he would follow that straddle bug to Mexico, but what he would find out where he was bound for and how long he was on the road. Lots of the boys here had seen the Smiley and can tell you about him. Why? It never long sorry. Why, it never once, for a good while, and it seemed as if they was wanting to save her. But one morning he came in, and Smiley asked how she was, and then he said she was considerable better, thank the Lord, for his infinite mercy in coming on so smart that, with a blessing of Providence, she'd go well set, and Smiley, before he thought, says, well, I'll risk 2.5 that she don't anyway. This year, Smiley had a mare the boys called her the 15-minute nag, but that was only in fun, because of course she was faster than that, and he used to win money on that horse for all she was so slow and always had the asthma, or the distemper, or the consumption, or something of that kind. They used to give her 200 or 300 yard start and then pass her underway, but always the fag end of the race she'd get sometimes in the air and sometimes out to one side amongst the fences and kicking up more dust and raising more racket with her coughing and sneezing and blowing her nose, and always fetch up at the stand just about a neck ahead, as near as you could cipher it down. And he had a little small bull pup that to look at him you'd think he wasn't worth a cent, but to sit around and look ornery and lay for a chance to steal something. But as soon as money was up on him, he was a different dog. His underjaw began to stick out like the forecastle of a steamboat, and his teeth would uncover and shine savage like the furnaces. And a dog might tackle him and bully, rag him, and bite him, and throw him over his shoulder 2 or 3 times. And Andrew Jackson, which was the name of the pup, Andrew Jackson would never let on, but what he was satisfied and hadn't expected nothing else, and the bets being doubled and doubled on the other side all the time. All the money was all up. And then all of a sudden he would grab that other dog just by the junt of his hind legs and freeze on it, not chew, you understand, but only just grip and hang on till they thronged up just over his hind leg and freeze on it, not chew, you understand, but only just grip and hang on till they thronged up the sponge. If it was a year, Smiley always come out winner on that buck till he harnessed a dog once that didn't have no hind legs because they'd been sawed off by a circular saw. And when the thing had gone along far enough and the money was all up, and he come to make a snatch for his pet belt, he saw in a minute how he had been imposed on, and how the other dog had him in the door, so to speak, and he veered up surprised, and then he looked sort of discouraged like, and didn't try no more to win the fight, and he got shucked out bad. He gives Smiley a look, as much as to say his heart was broke, and it was his fault for putting up a dog that had no hind legs for him to take bolt off, which was his main dependence in a fight. And then he limped off a piece and laid down and died. It was a good pup, was that Andrew Jackson, and would have made a name for himself if he had lived, for the stuff was in him. And he had genius, I know it, because he hadn't had no opportunity to speak of, and it don't stand to reason that a dog could make such a fight as he could under them circumstances if he hadn't no talent. It always makes me feel sorry when I think of that last fight of his and the way it turned out. Well, this year Smiley had rat tatters, terriers, and chicken cocks, and tomcats, and all them kind of things till you couldn't rest, and you couldn't fetch nothing for him to bet on, but he'd match you. He catched a frog one day and took him home and said he had calculated to educate him, and so he never done nothing for 3 months but sat in his backyard and learned that frog to jump. And you bet he did learn him too. He'd give him a little punch behind, and the next minute you'd see that frog whirling in the air like a donut. See him turn one somersault, or maybe a couple, if you got a good start, and come down flat-footed and all right like a cat. He got him up so in the matter of catching flies, and kept him in practice and so constant that he'd nail a fly every time as far as he could and see him. Smiley said all the frog wanted was education. And he could do most anything, and I believe him. Why, I've seen him set Daniel Webster down here on this floor. Daniel Webster was the name of the frog, and sing out and flop down on the floor again as solid as a gob of mud, and fall to scratching the side of his head with his hind foot as indifferent as if he had no idea he'd been doing any more than any frog might do. You never see a frog so modest and straightforward as he was, for all he was so gifted. And when it come to fair and square jumping on a dead level, he could get over more ground at one straddle than any animal of his breed you ever see. Jumping on a dead level was his strong suit, you understand. And when it come to that, Smiley would ante up money on him as long as he had a red. Smiley was monstrous proud of his frog, and well he might be. For fellers that had traveled and been everywhere, all said he laid over any frog that they ever did see. Well, Smiley kept the beast in a little lattice box, and he used to fetch him downtown sometimes and lay for a bet. One day a stranger in the camp, he was come across him with his box and says, "What might it be that you've got in that box?" And Smiley says, sorter indifferent like, "It might be a parrot, or it might be a canary, maybe, but it ain't. It's only just a frog." And the feller took it and looked at it careful and turned it round this way and that and says, so 'tis. Well, what's he good for?" "Well," Smiley says, easy and careless, "he's good enough for one thing. I should judge he can outjump any frog in Calaveras County." The fellow took the box again and took another long particular look and give it back to Smiley and says, very deliberate, "Well, I don't see no pence about that frog that's any better than any other frog." "Maybe you don't," Smiley says. "Maybe you understand frogs, and maybe you don't understand them. Maybe you've had experience, and maybe you ain't only an amateur, as it were. Anyways, I've got my opinion, and I'll risk $40 that he can outjump any frog in Calaveras County." And the feller studied a minute, and then says, kinder, sad like, "Well, I'm only a stranger here, and I ain't got no frog, but if I had a frog, I'd bet you." And then Smiley says, that's all right, if you'd hold my box a minute. I'll go and get you a frog." And so the feller took the box and put up his $40 along with Smiley's and sat down to wait. So he sat there a good while thinking to himself, and then he got the frog out and prized his mouth open and took a teaspoon and filled him full of quail shot, filled him pretty near up to his chin, and set him on the floor. Smiley, he went to the swamp and slopped around in the mud for a long time, and finally he catched a frog and fetched him in and gave him to this feller and says, "Now, if you're ready, set him alongside of Daniel with his forepaws, just even with Daniel, and I'll give the word." Then he says, 1, 2, 3, jump. And him and the feller touched up the frogs from behind, and the new frog hopped off. But Daniel gave a heave and hoisted up his shoulders so like a French man, but it wasn't no use. He couldn't budge. He was planted as solid as an anvil, and he couldn't no more stir than if he was anchored out. Smiley was a good deal surprised, and he was disgusted too, but he didn't have no idea what the matter was, of course. The feller took the money and started away, and when he was going out the door, he sort of jerked his thumb over his shoulder the way at Daniel and says again, very deliberate, "Well, I don't see no pence about that frog that's any better than any other frog." Smiley, he stood scratching his head and looking down at Daniel a long time, and at last he says, "I do wonder what in the nation that frog throwed off, for I wonder if there ain't something the matter with him. He appears to look mighty baggy somehow." And he catched Daniel by the nape of the neck and lifted him up and says, "Why, blame my cats if he don't weigh 5 pounds." And turned him upside down, and he belched out a double handful of shot. And then he see how it was, and he was the maddest man. He set the frog down and took out after that feller, but he never catched him. And here Simon Wheeler heard his name called from the front yard and got up to see what was wanted. And turning to me as he moved away, he said, "Just sit where you are, stranger, and rest easy. I ain't going to be gone a second. But, by your leave, I did not think that a continuation of the history of the enterprising vagabond Jim Smiley would be likely to afford me much information concerning the Reverend Leonidas W. Smiley, and so I started away. At the door, I met the sociable Wheeler returning, and he buttonholed me and recommended, "Well, this your Smiley had a yeller one-eyed cow that didn't have no tail, only just a short stump like a banana, and oh, hang Smiley and his afflicted cow," I muttered good-naturedly, and bidding the old gentleman good day, I departed. So the celebrated jumping frog of Calaveras County was translated into French in a magazine, and Mark Twain apparently had issue with that. And what he did was he took the French translation and he put it back into kind of word for word English. But here he is talking about it in English, then in French, then clawed back into a civilized language once more by patient, unremunerated toil. Even a criminal is entitled to fair play. And certainly when a man who has done no harm has been unjustly treated, he is privileged to do his best to right himself. My attention has just been called to an article some 3 years old in a French magazine entitled Revue des Deux Mondes, Review of Some Two Worlds, wherein the writer treats of les humoristes américains, these humorist Americans. I am one of these humorists, American dissected by him, and hence the complaint I am making. This gentleman's article is an able one, as articles go in the French, where they always tangle up everything to that degree that when you start into a sentence, you never know whether you are going to come out alive or not. It is a very good article, and the writer says all manner of kind and complimentary things about me, for which I am sure thank him with all my heart. But then why should he go and spoil all my praise by one unlucky experiment? What I refer to is this. He says my jumping frog is a funny story, but still he can't see why it should ever really convulse anyone with laughter, and straightway proceeds to translate it into French in order to prove to his nation that there is nothing so very extravagantly funny about it. Just there is where my complaint originates. He has not translated it at all. He has simply mixed it all up. It is no more like the jumping frog when he gets through with it than I am like a meridian of longitude. But my mere assertion is not proof. Wherefore I print the French version, that all may see that I do not speak falsely. Furthermore, in order that even the unlettered may know my injury and give me their compassion, I have been at infinite pains and trouble to retranslate this French version back into English, and to tell the truth, I have well nigh worn myself out at it. Having scarcely rested from my work during 5 days and nights, I cannot speak the French language, but I can translate it very well, though not fast, I being self educated. I asked the reader to run his eye over the original English version of The Jumping Frog, and then read the French or my retranslation, and kindly take notice how the Frenchman has riddled the grammar. I think it is the worst I ever saw, and yet the French are called a polished nation. If I had a boy that put sentences together as they do, I would polish him to some purpose. Without further introduction, The Jumping Frog, as I originally wrote it, was as follows: The Frog Jumping of the County of Calaveras. There was one time here an individual known under the name of Jim Smiley. It was in the winter of '89, possibly well as the spring of '50. I know me recollect not exactly. This which me makes to believe that it was the one or the other. It is that I shall remember that the grand flume is not achieved when he arrives at the camp for the first time, but of all sides he was the man the most fond of to bet which one hath seen, betting upon all that which is presented. When he could find an adversary, and when he could not of it could not, he passed up to the side opposed. All that which convenienced to the other to him convenienced also, seeing that he had had a bet. Smiley was satisfied. And he had a chance even worthless, nearly always he gained. It must to say that he was always near to himself exposed, but no one could mention the least thing without this galliard offered to bet the bottom, no matter what, and to take the side that won him would, as it said, all at the hour, tout à l'heure. If there was of races, you him find rich or ruined at the end. If it here is a combat of dogs, he bring his bet. He himself laid always for a combat of cats, for a combat of cocks. By blue, if you have see two birds upon a fence, you should have offered up to bet which of these birds shall fly the first. And if there is meeting at the camp, meeting au camp, he camps to bet regularly for the cure. Walker, which he judged to be the best predicator of the neighborhood, predicateur des avants, in which he was in effect and a brave man. He would encounter a bug of wood in the road, whom he will bet upon the time which he shall take to go where she would go, and if you him have take at the word, he will follow the bug as far as Mexique, without himself caring to go so far, neither the time which he there lost. One time the woman of the cure, Walker, is very sick during a long time. It seemed that one not her saved not, but one morning the cure arrives and smiling him demanded how she goes, and he said that she is well better, grace to the infinite misery. Lui demande comment elle va, et il dit qu'elle est bien mieux grâce à l'infini miséricorde, so much better that with the benediction of the providence she herself of it would pull out Elsa and Terrier. And behold, that without their thinking, Smiley responds, well, I gauge 2.5 that she will die all the same. This Smiley had an animal which the boys called the nag of the quarter of hour, but solely for pleasantry, you comprehend, because, well, understand, she was more fast as that. Now, why that exclamation? Note, Mark Twain. And it was custom of to gain of the silver with his beast, notwithstanding she was poussive, connard, always taking of asthma, of colics or of consumption, of something of approaching. One him would give 200 or 300 yards at the departure, then one him pass without pain, but never at the last she not fail of herself échauffée, of herself exasperate, and she arrives herself escartant, as so defendant, her legs grayless in the air before the obstacles, sometimes them elevating and making with this more of dust than any horse, more of noise above with his etenuements and reniflements, crack. She arrives them always, first by one head, as just as one can measure. Any had she arrives, then always first, and he had a small bulldog, who to him sees no value, not a cent One would believe that to bet against him it was to steal, so much he was ordinary. But as soon as the game made, she becomes another dog. Her jaw inferior commenced to project like a deck of before, his teeth themselves discovered brilliant like some furnaces, and a dog could him tackle, le taquiner, him excite, him murder, le mordre, him throw 2 or 3 times over his shoulder. Andre Jackson. This was the name of the dog. Andre Jackson takes that tranquilly, as he not himself was never expecting other things. And when the bets were doubled and redoubled against him, he seized the other dog just at the articulation of the leg of behind, and he not it leave more, not that he masticate, you conceive, but he himself there shall be holding deering until that one throws the sponge in the air. Must he wait a year? Smiley gained always with this beast. La, unhappily, they have unfinished, or they have finished by elevating a dog who had no feet of behind, because one of them had sawed, and when things were at the point that he would, and that he came to himself throw upon his morsel favorite, the poor dog comprehended in an instant that he himself was deceived in him, and that the other dog him had, have. Have never seen person having the air more pinode and more discouraged. He not made no effort to gain the combat, and was rudely shucked. Eh bien, this Smiley nourished some terriers à rats, and some cocks of combat, and some pats, and all sorts of things, and with his rage of betting one no had more of repose. He trapped one day a frog, and him imported with him, et l'emporta chez lui, saying that he pretended to make his education. You may believe if you will, but during these 3 months he has not nothing done but to him apprehend to jump, apprendre à sauter, and a court retired of her mansion, dismissal, and I respond that he hath succeeded. He him gives a small blow by behind, and the instant after you shall see the frog turn in the air like a greased biscuit, make one somersault, sometimes two, when she was well startled, and refall upon his feet like a cat. He had him accomplished in the art to gobble the flies, gobe de mouche, and him there exercised continually, so well that a fly at the most far that she appeared was a fly lost. Smiley had custom to say that all which lacked so a frog it was the education, but with the education she could do nearly all, and I him believe. Today I him have seen pose Daniel Webster there upon this plank. Daniel Webster was the name of the frog, and to him saying, "Some flies, Daniel, some flies." In a flash of the eye, Daniel 30 had bounded and seized the fly here upon the counter, then jumped anew at the earth, where he rested truly to himself, scratched the head with his behind foot, as if he had not the least idea of his superiority. Never ye have not seen frog as modest, as natural, sweet as she was. And when he himself agitated to jump purely and simply upon plain earth, she does more ground in one jump than any beast of his species that you can know. To jump plain, this was his strong. When he himself agitated for that, Smiley multiplied the bets upon her as long as there to him remained a red. It must to know, Smiley was monstrously paid of his frog, and he of it was right. For some men who were traveled, who had all seen, said that they to him would be injurious to him compared to another frog. Smiley guarded Daniel in a little box latticed, which he carried by times to the village for some bets. One day an individual, a stranger at the camp, had him arrested with his box, and him said, "What is this that you have them shut up there within?" Smiley said, with an air indifferent, "That could be a paroquet, or a syringe, ou un serin. But this it's nothing of such. It not is, but a frog." The individual it took, it regarded him with care. It turned from one side and from the other. Then he said, "Tiens, in effect, at what is she good?" "My God," responds Smiley, always with an air disengaged, "she is good for one thing, to my notice, à mon avis. She can better in jumping, elle peut battre en sautant all frogs of the county of Calaveras. The individual retook the box. It examined it anew longly, and it rendered to Smiley insane with an air deliberate. Eh bien, I know saw not that frog had nothing of better than each frog. Je ne vois pas que cette grenouille ait rien de mieux qu'une grenouille. If that isn't grammar gone to seed, then I count myself no judge. Note by Mark Twain. Possible that you not is saw not, said Smiling. Possible that you comprehend frogs. Possible that you not there, you comprehend nothing. Possible that you had of the experience. And possible that you not be but an amateur. Of all manner, de toute manière, de toute manière. I bet $40 that she better in jumping no matter which frog of the county of Calaveras. The individual reflected a second and said, like sad, I not am but a stranger here. I know have not a frog, but if I of it had one, I would embrace the bet. Strong well, responds Smiley, nothing of more facility. If you will hold my box a minute, I go you to search a frog. J'irai vous chercher. Behold, then, the individual who guards the box, who puts his $40 upon those of Smiley, and who attends, et qui attend, he attended enough long times, reflecting all solely. And figure you that he takes Daniel, him opens the mouth by force, and with a teaspoon him fills with shot of the hunt, even him fills just to the chin. Then he puts him by the earth. Smiley during these times was at slopping in a swamp. Finally he attraped a frog, him carried to that individual, and said, Now if you be ready, put up all against Daniel, with their before feet upon the same line, and I give the signal. Then he added, 1, 2, 3, advance. Him and the individual touched their frogs by behind, and the frog knew put to jump smartly. But Daniel himself lifted ponderously, exalted the shoulders thus, like a Frenchman. To what good? He could not budge. He is planted as solid like a church. He not advanced no more than if one him had put at the anchor. Smiley was surprised and disgusted, but he know himself doubted not of the turn being intended. Mais il ne se doutait pas de tout, bien entendu. The individual pocketed the silver himself with it went, and of it himself in going is it that he no gives not a jerk of thumb over the shoulder, like that, at the poor Daniel, and saying with his air deliberate, La vin de Dieu embauche, l'argent s'en va, et en son allant, et est-ce que non pas un coup de pouce par-dessus l'épaule comme au gars, au pauvre Daniel, on descend de son air de la mer. Eh bien, I see not that frog has nothing better than another. Smiley himself scratched long times the head, the eyes fixed upon Daniel, until that which at last he said, I me demand how the devil it makes itself that this beast has refused. Is it that she had something? One would believe that she is stuffed. He grasped Daniel by the skin of the neck, him lifted, and said, The wolf may bite if he no weigh not 5 pounds. Him reversed, and the unhappy belched 2 handfuls of shot, el malheureux, etc. When Smiley recognized how it was, he was like mad. He deposited his frog by the earth and ran after that individual, but he him not caught never. Such is the jumping frog. To the sordid French eye, I claim that I never put together such an odious mixture of bad grammar and delirium tremens in my life, and what has a poor foreigner like me done to be abused and misrepresented like this? When I say, well, I don't see no pints about that frog that's any better than any other frog, Is it kind? Is it just for this French man to try to make it appear that I said, eh bien, I know saw not that that frog had nothing better than each frog? I have no heart to write more. I never felt so about anything before.